Everyone. Welcome to the Pong tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to be prototyping Pong. We're going to be using Unity. Unity is a really great IDE, which is just a integrated development environment. That means that you do most of your work completely within this environment. The basic version of it is free to download. You can go to unity3d.com, click on the download. You can download 4.3.2, which is the most current version. There is a 30-day trial of Pro. We're not going to be using any of the Pro stuff, so you don't really need to get it. You can just use the free license, which has a few limitations. License comparison, here we go. So you can see that you've got all the important things like physics, nav meshes, audio. You just don't have some of the other little things. That's pretty much it. Just download the free version. That's what we're going to use. I do have the Pro version, but I'm not going to be using any Pro elements. Unity recently, an update to Unity was recently released to include a built-in 2D engine. Now, previously, Unity was a 3D only game. It was, as you see it here, a 3D environment. You built mostly 3D games. You could build 2D games, but it was pretty difficult. You had to fudge the physics a lot because the physics engine was still a 3D physics engine. It was looking for the z-axis, this blue axis here, whereas in 2D we only want the y and the x. So the inclusion of this built-in engine has been extremely beneficial. It's got a whole bunch of really awesome automatic sprite makers, which are 2D assets. Those are 2D art images, things like that. We're not going to get too detailed into it. I want to jump right into the tutorial. I will be providing you with the image sprites, but I will not be providing you with the scripts. You can copy them as you watch this tutorial. It will be in 3D, or 3D, HD, I'm sorry, high def. So you should be able to read them and see them, but I do want you to type them out. I don't want you to just copy paste. So that's why you're not getting them as part of the tutorial package. So, all right, let's get to it. So in Unity, I'm just going to create a new scene here. In Unity, you're generally shown with this big blank screen here. Scenes are how Unity divides up its different levels. Scenes are just specific arrangements of all of the assets. Here in this hierarchy tab, all of your elements, all of your arrangements of assets in that scene will show up. So right now, let me save this scene as scene folder. Save it as 2. So 1 is this completed Pong tutorial. You can see that I've got all of these different assets here, and as I kind of mouse over them, it selects them and shows you what they are. If we go back to 2, you see there's nothing here. I've got the camera. That's about it. I do have a bunch of assets in the project already, and this project tab here just maps to a folder on your hard drive, which you can reveal. If you're on Mac, you reveal it in your Finder. If you're on Windows, you reveal it in your Explorer. But it is just a folder that sits on your hard drive, and you can see that I've got this game folder. Here's all the files that Unity needs. Assets are all the things that I'm going to add to it, so scenes, scripts, sprites, standard assets. These are just things I include. You may want to include this stuff. You actually will not need physics materials. Well, actually, no, you will need physics materials because we're going to modify a physics material to make a new one. And I'll show you how to do that. And that's all stuff you can set up when you make a new project. So if you go new project, it'll ask you a few things. If you forget to do it, you can always import a package under assets. So you can come and import the physics materials, and then you can modify those physics materials to work for the 2D engine. Why there's no built-in 2D physics materials, I don't know. But for now, that's the workaround. So, all right, so you start your scene. Try to keep your project folder organized, so create different folders for like your scenes, your scripts, your sprites. Scripts are just little bits of code, as you can see over here, that will that give elements behaviors, but it can also do a lot of overarching sort of managing of the different assets and stuff. So you can have like later on we'll be building a scorekeeper, and the scorekeeper script will need to just exist in the world. It doesn't really get put onto anything specific, and it just passes information from one script to another script, etc. For Pong, it's pretty simple. Pong, we need something to move the ball and something to move the paddles, but first we need to have the balls and the paddles, so we need to build a sprite. Now, in the sprite, I built mine in Photoshop. You can just start a new document in Photoshop. Size is not super important right now. We'll just create one like this. And then we need a paddle. So I'm going to create something that looks like a paddle. I don't care what colors you pick. So there's a paddle there. I suggest just then copying and pasting that paddle. You want to have your background set up to be transparent. If you don't, you can do that under New. You just set up your background contents to be transparent. If you don't, if you don't do that, you can create a new layer above your background layer and then select your background layer and delete it. You're going to want these guys to be on different layers. So let's actually change, let's invert that selection. We'll just select that guy. Let's change our color here. And then let's make a ball. So let's grab your elliptical. Actually, make a new layer first. Let's grab our ball, G, and then let's make it yellow. All right, so I'll just arrange these guys here. And then I'm just going to crop it down. It's good to just not have a lot of extraneous space. You don't need it. It just makes the file size bigger. Not that much bigger, but we want to get into the habit of optimizing as much as possible. So we can save that now. We'll just save it as assets, sprites, and we'll just call this Pong sprites 2. Save it as a PSD. Then we also need to save it as a PNG in order to preserve that. Well, actually, we should be able to make the sprites from. Okay, yep. I can make the sprite from the. Oh, no, I can't. Actually, yes, I can. There's a sprite editor. That's what I need. All right, so once you've got your sprite made, you're going to come in and select the texture type and change it to sprite. You can do multiple sprites because we have multiple in there. We're going to open the sprite editor. Slicing can be automatic. Let's see, yep, and you shouldn't have to change anything. You can see that it shows up pretty well. Good, and then just hit apply. Make sure that it has, see those little white backgrounds around each of your pieces. Hit apply. And you should now have a drop down with different sprites, which is what we want. All right, so once you've got that done, you can just grab them and drop them into, oops. Okay, grab them one at a time apparently. And drop them into your world. You can see them, they'll show up like this. This is what we want to happen. When you do this, every time you select one of these elements, one of these game objects as they're called in Unity, you should come over to the inspector and sort of take a look at what's happening here. Because it's a sprite, it's got a sprite renderer, it's got position data, so position, rotation, scale. I am going to put the ball, oops, not the paddle. Let's move the ball kind of, move the ball over here, or that part over here for a sec. You can change the name of these two if you want. And red. Okay. Now I just want to make sure that I'm starting things in the right space. Y is your up axis, of course. That's your up and down. I'm gonna make these all, we'll just go -4, actually let's go -6. These units are just inherent to Unity. They're just like Unity units, essentially. They don't really map to anything else. We are also going to make that 0, so it's right in the center. Okay, so everything's pretty centered. You can click on this box. You won't necessarily see this color changer. I don't have the default color picker turned on. Let's grab Unity preferences really quick. Not so quick. There we go. Colors. Oh wait, sorry. External tools. Okay, OS 10 color picker. If I turn that off, then you'll see this is the default Unity color picker. I just don't like it very much, so I don't use it. You can grab these guys. You can make it whatever color you want. Doesn't really matter to me. Everything else is fine. Like these are just settings for the camera, like projection, orthographic. You can change it to orthographic if you want. Orthographic just means there's no depth. So if you were going to be doing like parallax or any of those neat effects you see on more advanced 2D games, those actually have the illusion of depth. You'd want to keep the camera at perspective, so it would do that. I'm going to leave it at perspective for now, so we don't have to mess with it too much. Okay. Nothing else really needs to be changed. I would just leave it the way it is. All right. So now we've got our elements in here, but there's no behavior. They're not moving. There's nothing going on here. There's nothing happening. Let's make something happen. So in order to make things happen in Unity, we need to write scripts. Now we're going to be writing a bunch of JavaScript. All of the scripting I do is in JavaScript, or at least Unity script, which is the Unity implementation of JavaScript. If you know C#, if you have that kind of experience, feel free to dive into Unity C#. I don't do that because it's a little more complicated than JavaScript in my opinion, and my experiences with JavaScript. I think JavaScript is easier for first-timers to pick up. So if you don't know C#, don't worry about it. You can just follow along, and we'll be doing JavaScript, so you'll be totally okay. All right, so we need to create a new script here, a new file. So just come up, create JavaScript. You can pop that in there, and it'll say new behavior script. Now, every word in the script name should be capitalized. That's just a affectation of JavaScript. It's necessary. So if you do change the name, make sure that you capitalize every word. I already have one made. We're going to be doing that. We're going to be using that. So let's open that up. You'll see I've got some stuff in here already. I want to talk about the order of functions in JavaScript, or at least in Unity. In C#, these would just be called voids instead of functions. But anyway, so functions are executed in this order. Awake is the very first thing. It's called whenever the scene itself is first loaded. Start is called whenever the script is first loaded. And it happens always before update. These are both only ever called once. Or I'm sorry, awake is only ever called once. Start is called every time the script is called. Fixed update is called the most often. This is called multiple times during a frame. Now a frame refers to the frame rate, so if your game is running at 60 frames per second, fixed update will be called at least 60 times, if not more. All the physics calculations occur after fixed update. Fixed update is the best place for like movement calculations and things that depend on a good reliable time because it's not tied to the frame rate. Update is the main function you will be using. This happens once a frame. This is tied directly to the frame rate, so if your frame rate is suffering, if it's very low, then update is only going to be called, isn't going to be called out frequently. Late update, I never use late update, but it's called right after, once per frame right after update. Cleanup things can happen in late update. Like I said, I never use it. But let's get started writing our script for our ball movers. So we're going to be moving this ball around. I'm just commenting. I'm doing a block comment. You can just follow along. I'm not going to talk too much. Well, I'll just be talking as I'm typing, sort of thinking about this is sort of how I write scripts. I know that in order to move this ball, I'm going to need to apply force to it right when the scene or the script starts, preferably when the scene starts, because it needs to happen right away. So it needs to go into function awake. So you see that we have, it didn't work. We have some autocomplete things that will happen in monodevelop. Right now, autocomplete seems a little broken for me, so I'm not going to depend on it too much. Yeah, the Unity stuff is not working. So I'm setting up a variable called direction within awake. This is just going to get called. So variable, I need to write it up here. Variable direction. It's going to be a vector2 direction because it's in 2 dimensions. So vector is just vector is literally a direction something is going. You have vector 3 and vector 2. XY is vector 2, those are those coordinates, and XYZ is vector 3. Anyway, so back down here to awake. So variable direction, we're going to call vector 2. We want to move it in a random direction, so we're going to go random dot range. Our range is going to be between -3 and 3. And then that's our x coordinate. And then random dot range -2, 2, that's our y. And then we need to close it with a semicolon. So we're setting the value for variable direction. So that will be a different direction according to those ranges we set up for x and y. The first value here, this is the x, and then the second value is the y. All right, then we need to apply force to the rigid body. We're going to have a rigid body 2D. You can see it here. Dot add force direction. Because we are using the 2D engine, it needs to be a rigid body 2D. A rigid body is a component that allows physics to interact with the game object. Sorry, not direction. Rigid body, again, 2D dot, oh wait, no, it is direction. That's right. Direction times speed. We don't have a speed variable set up, so let's do that now. Variable speed is of type float. Whenever you see a colon like this in a variable, that means it's declaring a type, so and not just a value. You could alternatively say equals 1.0, and that would also say it's a floating number. If you were to just do 1, that would be an integer, so it's whole numbers, there's no decimal points, but you do want speed because it is a constantly variable number. You want it to be a float, so I just type float. I don't want to declare a value right away for no reason whatsoever, really. It's just kind of preference. All right, I think that's all we need in variable awake, or function awake. So let's set up our next function. Now, this isn't going to be any of the functions that we listed up here. These are the built-in functions. We're actually going to, well, these are the main built-in functions. We're going to be using another one. We need to now decide what's going to happen whenever the ball hits something. So if the ball hits the paddle, there's a certain thing that I want it to do, right? I want it to add force, I guess, according to some variable that we set up. You know, so maybe it's like simulating. No on collision enter apparently. Maybe it's simulating how hard you hit it or something. So we're going to be using a function called onCollisionEnter. If you want to know more about any of this stuff, you can go to Unity script reference and just do a search. Spell it correctly. See onCollisionEnter, and you're going to see that we've got a couple of different kinds. We're looking at the mono behavior. So function onCollisionEnter, it's a collider of type collision, or I'm sorry, it's a collision of type collision. So if it's looking for another collider, which is another kind of game object that we'll eventually talk about. Right now, we're not getting too into Unity. The differences, the functions and differences of Unity. Collision, lowercase. Make sure it's a lowercase collision. Can't tell where my cursor is, sorry. That was weird. Type collision. Should have known that. Then we need brackets because now we're going to set up what's going to happen in the function. Okay, so if the ball hits another collider, first we want to check and see what that collider is. So if it's a game object, which most things are game objects, which we need actually lowercase, so game object.tag is equal to, then notice I put 2 equal signs. This means it has to absolutely be this value. And it's going to be a string called paddle. The string is just a collection of literal characters that we're looking for. That another bracket. If the game object.tag is paddle, then we're going to rigid body add force. So we're going to add force to the rigid body. Programming like this is kind of like speaking like Yoda, right? Your subject-object is flipped. So anyway, that was just something that struck me. Rigid body, let's see. Yeah, rigid body 2D dot velocity. Make sure it doesn't capitalize the R. Velocity times paddle power. We'll just call it paddle power. So now we need to set up a variable called paddle power. Variable paddle power is of type float. It's going to be a number that's going to shift a lot. All right, so let's take a look at that. If the game object .tag is paddle, then add force to the rigid body. Okay, so if like I said, then we'll add force to the rigid body. The type of force we're going to add is the velocity, so whatever speed it's already traveling at, times paddle power, which is just a variable we'll set up. And that should give it a nice little boost. So then we're going to set up an else. All right, otherwise, or else, we're going to hit the rigid body. We're going to add force to the rigid body. So this is if it hits anything else. Anything else being like the walls of the arena that we're going to set up here. Add force rigid body. Again, lowercase, 2D. Man, it uppercased everything. Starting to like doubt whether or not the lowercase is right, but it's because I do too much coding. So anyway, the velocity times 100, and you can set this to be whatever. You could actually set this up to be a variable if you wanted. It could be, other power, right? If you wanted to adjust it so that if it hits the walls, it goes faster or slower or anything like that. So. Otherwise, that looks good. I think that's all we need. Let's save it. And it is apparently yelling at me for some reason. Okay, nope, it's gone. All right, so once you save the script and you come back into Unity, it should compile. You'll see like a little busy signal down here on the right, like a little spinny thing. It is sort of soft compiling it. It's trying to decide if what you've written actually will work. And if it does, then hey, you're cool. So the next thing we need to do is add our script onto our component. You can do this one of 2 ways. You can either drag it and drop it on here. You can drag it and drop it in here. Or you can just drag it over here and add it right there. The other thing we need to add to our ball is a 2D rigid body. So come to hit Add Component, Physics 2D, Rigid Body 2D. Mass is good. Gravity scale, set that to 0. We don't want gravity to affect it. Linear drag, we don't want any linear drag, etc., etc. We can now hit play up here at the top, and it should take off, but it's going to shoot. Wow, it totally didn't take off. All right. Why did it not take off? Should have shot off. That was very weird. Rigid body mass. Oh, haha, speed, because speed is 0. Let's hit speed at 100. There we go. And see, it just goes right through because it doesn't know what's going on. Yeah, okay. Because we don't have any colliders or anything set up for these guys. So let's actually do that now. So we're going to hit Add Component, Physics 2D, Box Collider. It should be just this little, it's kind of actually hard to see. There is now a little green box around that guy, although we can't really see it. We're going to add the same thing to our other paddle. We don't want it to be a trigger or anything. We do want to add materials to these guys, and we're going to set up this bouncy material. I'll show you how. So we're going to go Standard Assets. We're going to make a new material. Oh wait, sorry. Delete that. Wrong kind of material. Create new Physics 2D material. So we're going to have this blank thing. We're going to call it bouncy. Maybe bouncier. We're going to set friction at 0 and bounce at 1. This bounce, you can kind of have it be whatever you want. Okay, no, 1 is 100%, 0 is 0. So I think that's what I have set up for bouncy. So then we need to grab our paddles, make them use that material, literally just drag it and drop it. Now when the ball shoots off, okay, it's going to go down that way. Let's also set up the bounds of our camera here, bounds of our world. In order to do that, we're going to create some invisible colliders. Right? The colliders, unfortunately, we can't just drop in here by themselves. They have to be attached to a game object, but luckily we can create invisible game objects. You can do that by just hitting or coming up and creating an empty game object. I'm going to call this top wall. We're going to move it kind of up here. There's really nothing we can see yet. We're then going to add a collider to it. We will also give that collider the bouncy material. Bouncy material just helps to make the ball keep moving. So we're going to grab our scale button here. That's that right handmost button at the top. It's also the R key on your keyboard. And you can just drag it out like that and just sort of position it where you want it. Let's see, what's our camera here? It's our orthographic camera. Okay, so I'm going to switch to orthographic camera just so that I can position things. All right, that's good enough. Top wall we can now duplicate, so you just hit Control D or Command D and call it bottom wall, and then I'm just going to drag it down. Okay, maybe actually make them wall bottom, or spell bottom correctly, and then wall top. That just helps to keep things a little more organized. Specific objects, stuff like that. All right, the next thing we need to do, just make another, well, you can duplicate that if you want, drag it over here. We're just going to scale it down a little differently now. Let's make our X scale 1, and then we'll scale it up. Doesn't matter if it's super good, but wall right. And we'll duplicate wall right for wall left. And move it over here. Let's grab, so you can kind of see I'm sort of looking at where the camera is, I think, a little bit. Now we're going to have these colliders because later on we'll be doing some scorekeeping stuff. And we're going to be using these colliders as sort of like end zones or goal boxes. Can also turn on, let's see, the effects. Oh, I forget what it is now. There was a button for turning everything on. No, I don't remember what it was. Yeah. Just making sure everything was on all the time, but okay. So that should work. Let's go ahead and hit play and see where the ball goes. It should just go right through it. Why did that happen? Everything is on the same plane. Huh, that was weird. Should have bounced right off of it. Been staring at this too long. So you also need to stick a circle collider onto your ball. Otherwise, it's not going to hit anything. You can then just stick the bouncy material on that if you want, instead of having it on your paddles. It's up to you kind of where you want that to be. I'm going to leave it on the ball and not the paddles. That should now make it pretty bouncy. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now the only thing we need to do is get the paddles moving. We can adjust the speed, of course, of the ball. That speed is not what I want it to be. Let's try 400. This is the nice thing about Unity. Yeah, there we go. Okay. You can do really rapid changes and sort of see how those changes work. So, okay, let's work on our paddles. Let's work on our paddle script. So you need to create a new script called Paddle Mover. Let's open it up. We're going to assign different keys for different strings. So we're going to do variable key assign. Will just be our variable here. Function update. Actually, I'll just delete all these and then type it out for you. So let's go function update because it's going to happen all the time. Come down here. So I know we're going to need to. So function updates. If the input is a certain key, so get key. What key? We're going to do key assign 1 is our variable. You can call your variable anything. It's good to sometimes have it be literal. So transform, we're going to affect the transform. And then we'll go which part of the transform, the translate, so what direction it's going to move. And then we need to set up our X, Y, and Z. Now we're not going to be doing the X at all because we're just going to move up and down, so we're moving the Y. And how much we move in the Y is totally up to us. We're going to move maybe 4. Actually, let's put this in fixed update. So used fixed update because this is going to be a movement script. So we're going to go 4 times time.time. And then nothing in the Z. And then we'll come up and make an else if, otherwise, else if input dot get key is key assign 2. This is going to be that second variable we're going to set up here in a sec. Transform dot translate 0 time 0. So the same speed. Set up our variables here. So variable key assign 1 is a string, and variable key assign 2 is a string. All right, so save it. Looks pretty good. Come back into Unity, see that little circle. So name string does not denote a valid type. Oh, because it made it lowercase for us. So make it uppercase. Should turn green, or whatever color you have syntax highlighting for. Oops. Okay, everything compiles. Let's look at our paddle mover. Let's stick it on our blue paddle and our red paddle. Now we didn't set up specifically what keys in the script because I just wanted to have one script for both paddles, and then we can just set up different keys in the inspector here. Now, whenever you have variables and you make them public, which is what these variables are, they will show up in the inspector. If you make them private variables, they will not show up in the inspector. So if I do this, it'll load and key assign 2 should disappear. Yeah, see, so it went away. But I want that, so we'll delete it, come back here, it'll load. All right, so I'm gonna set up keys. I'm gonna use the O and K key for the blue paddle, and then use the W and S keys for the red paddle. Now we hit play. Oh man, they shot up. That was ridiculous. That was crazy. All right, so let's actually just leave it an update, and then we'll change it to delta time. There's something funny going on with the time. Oops. All right, so save that. Play. There we go, that's better. Oh, haha, so here we go. This needs to be a negative number. On key assign 2, because that's our down key, so we need to move in the opposite direction. So hit play. There we go, now we're moving up and down. So now you've got Pong, essentially. The original Pong didn't have a score. Score was kept by the players themselves, so didn't really have to worry about it. It did reset whenever the balls hit the edges, which is a interesting thing to do as well. We'll explore that when next week, but or in the next tutorial video. But for this tutorial video, this is all we need to do. So you need to make your assets. You need to make them sprites. So use your sprite editor. You're going to want to create a new 2D physics material and then write 2 very simple scripts, ball mover and paddle mover. So, all right, if you have any questions, feel free to get a hold of me during the various channels. Otherwise, good luck and have fun.